On October 29th, 2023, the nation now known as Turkey marked a century since the establishment of its modern republic. This milestone came nearly 100 years after the collapse of one of the world's most enduring empires, which had ruled vast stretches of the Middle East, North Africa, and Southeastern Europe for over 6 centuries. At its height, this empire emerged from a small principality in northwestern Anatolia and grew to become one of the most culturally and economically diverse powers of its era, shaping politics, society, and trade across 3 continents. The empire's origins trace back to the migration of Turkic peoples from northeastern Asia into the Eurasian steppes. By the 7th century, they had reached regions near modern-day Russia, Kazakhstan, and Mongolia, gradually moving westward over the centuries. Settling around the Caspian and Aral Seas, some of these Turkic groups adopted a semi-nomadic lifestyle. Among them, one clan broke away under a leader who laid the groundwork for a new dynasty that would later dominate the region. Over time, this dynasty absorbed local culture, embraced Islam, and established control over significant territories in Anatolia, following victories against neighboring powers. By the 14th century, this emerging state had started consolidating power in northwestern Anatolia, taking advantage of the decline of neighboring empires. It gradually extended influence over the remaining Byzantine territories in the Balkans and Anatolia, establishing strategic cities as its centers of governance. The capture of key cities, culminating in the conquest of the Byzantine capital in 1453, marked a turning point, enabling the empire to expand further across the eastern Mediterranean, the Middle East, North Africa, and into parts of Europe. The empire's military strength was a key factor in its rise. Elite infantry units, renowned cavalry and artillery allowed the state to project power effectively. Among these forces, soldiers known as janissaries, recruited from Christian populations, were converted and rigorously trained to serve as disciplined troops loyal to the central authority. Combined with an organized bureaucracy and a sophisticated administrative system, these elements allowed the empire to manage diverse populations while maintaining long-distance trade networks connecting Europe, Asia, and Africa. During its peak under a particularly famous ruler, the empire extended its reach from the northern Black Sea to North Africa, the Arabian Peninsula, and deep into Europe. Naval campaigns, sieges, and territorial conquests established it as a dominant force in the Mediterranean and Balkans. Cities such as Constantinople became hubs of political, economic, and cultural activity, blending traditions from various civilizations under imperial rule. Despite military and territorial successes, the empire eventually faced setbacks. Naval defeats against European powers highlighted the limits of its expansion in the Mediterranean, while repeated sieges in Central Europe, particularly at Vienna, marked the beginning of its gradual decline. By the late 17th century, the empire began to stagnate economically and politically. Central authority weakened as sultans increasingly relied on ministers and regional governors to administer distant provinces. While religious tolerance allowed Christian and Jewish communities to thrive, internal administration grew increasingly decentralized, and corruption and inefficiency became more common. Economic challenges compounded these problems. The shift of global trade routes from the Mediterranean to the Atlantic Ocean bypassed the empire, reducing revenues from traditional Silk Road commerce. Meanwhile, European rivals advanced technologically, leaving the empire behind in military and industrial development. Throughout the 18th and 19th centuries, neighboring powers, including Russia and Austria, exploited the empire's weakening grip, seizing territories in the Balkans, the Caucasus, and along the Black Sea. In North Africa, provincial governors gradually asserted autonomy, further fragmenting central control. The 19th century saw a series of revolts and wars that chipped away at the empire's remaining authority. Serbia, Greece, and other Balkan states achieved independence, often with support from European powers seeking to limit the empire's influence. Algeria fell under French control, and other territories were contested by Austria-Hungary and Russia. Despite attempts at reform, including efforts to modernize governance and establish a constitutional system, the empire struggled to regain stability. The outbreak of the First World War accelerated the empire's final collapse. Aligning with the Central Powers, it sought to reclaim lost influence, but suffered significant military losses on multiple fronts. Allied forces occupied large parts of the country, and nationalist uprisings within the empire further weakened its position. The war also brought darker consequences, as minority populations experienced targeted persecution with devastating human costs. By the end of the conflict, the empire's territorial remnants were largely confined to the Anatolian heartland. Foreign powers contemplated dividing these lands among themselves, threatening the very existence of the Turkish population within the former imperial domain. In response, a nationalist movement emerged, led by a former military officer who organized resistance against occupation and foreign intervention.